I'm Rick Dior, and today we're going to have a lot of fun. This is going to be a long video on jazz snare drums. So I took out some of my favorite drums that I use in this style, and we'll be going through some wood drums and some different kinds of metal drums. So we'll set the ground rules first. What we're going to do is use the same kit and the same cymbals and the same mic setup for every snare. Now, as far as the mic setup goes, I'm only using one overhead stereo mic, which is an AKG C24, and I'm using a bass drum mic, which is a cheap Shure Beta 52. That's it. No reverb, no nothing, just the sound of the room and sound of the drums. So here you have a Gretsch Centennial snare. You've seen this in many of my videos. It goes with this kit, so I figured we'd start with this one. And by the way, the cymbals I'm using, I'll put it in the description, but I put up several cymbals so you could have a good idea of what these snare drums sound like with different types of cymbals. So here to my left, your right, I have a Paiste traditional flat ride from the 1990s. Has some rivets in it. To my right, your left, my main ride here is a K 21 inch. It's an original K from the 1940s. And down here to my right, your left, is a traditional, this is another Paiste, a traditional Swish or China with some rivets in it. This is also from the 1990s. And a crash cymbal here is an old K from the 1950s. It's an 18-inch K, and the hi-hats I'm using are 15-inch old Ks from the 1950s. So those are the cymbals. That's what you'll hear everything with. I'll try to do different combinations of cymbals so you can hear what the snare drums sound like with the cymbals, which is very important to me. And that's how I pick my snare drums, depending on what kind of music I'm playing. You know, do they match with the sound of the cymbals I'm using? It's especially important in jazz. So lots of different drummers have different snare drum signatures. You know, you might have that old Gretsch sound, like a Philly Joe kind of sound. You might have that kind of high-pitched, almost piccolo snare drum sound that Roy Haynes has, and everything in between. Those are the two extremes there. So we'll be talking about that. As I put each snare drum up, I'm going to probably do a little bit of tuning, so you can see that too. I have not tuned these drums before the video, so I'll be doing that. Many of them have calf heads, and some even have calf heads top and bottom. So I would say probably half of them have calf heads. And also I'll give you I have two of the exact same drums, which is a Pearl Marvin Smitty Smith copper drum, and I put calf on one and plastic on the other, so you'll be able to hear the same drum with calf and plastic. So like I said, this will be a long video, so grab a beer or whatever else you want to drink. Try to not have commercials through this video, because I know that's annoying, so I'll disable those just at the beginning and the end. All right, so the sticks I'm using are these Vic Firth sticks that they make for me. It's basically a Bolero tip, a little bit modified, a little bit longer, with an SD9 shaft and a thicker taper. It's a longer taper. So the stick is about 16¼ inches long. I'll also be playing some brushes. I'll try to keep it short, otherwise we'll be here all day, on each drum, if I remember. So like I said, we'll start out with this Gretsch Centennial. This drum set is from 1983. You know, Gretsch snare drums get a bad rap, in my opinion. Some of them sound just incredible. In other words, you'll hear later on a chrome over brass snare drum that's just amazing. I think it's a 1460. I'll look at the number. And that's my favorite metal snare drum, pretty much. One of my favorites, between that and another one. And this is one of my favorite wood drums all around, but definitely for jazz, this is one of my favorite jazz drums. It always sounds good, and I use it a lot, like I said, for most of these videos. So the snares on here are stock. This is what came with it. You know they're Gretsch because they say response on them. And it's cool because these snares match the rest of the drum which is gold plated. It's just a beautiful drum. And it is a 6.5 by 14. It's got an old calf skin on the top. It's an old Radio King. And it's got a Ambassador. Actually, let me make sure I'm giving you the right information. It's a Gretsch Permatone, so it's basically an Ambassador, a Remo Ambassador on the bottom, thickness snare head. So we'll play some rolls on each drum, and I'll play with the snares off as well. So we'll start with this one. So I consider this a great all-round drum. It feels good. It sounds good with the snares off. Everything works great. The strainer works great. I love the calf heads on here. I always leave calf heads on this drum. It has a really good response. It's very snappy. It's very fast sounding. So that's the Gretsch Centennial. So we'll put this down. Now the next wood drum is something you might have heard on an earlier video. I can't remember which one I'm going to post first, but I did a video on this the other day. And this is a WFL piccolo drum, and let me raise this up. So I believe this is a Buddy Rich drum from 1949 or so. We'll find out when I post it. I'm sure all you collectors will chime in. And I put calf heads on this the other day. I kind of did a bunch of work on it, and they're still kind of getting broken in. And of course, when you put them on the first couple days, they take a dive. Now, I put heads on top and bottom. That's always kind of, you have to babysit them. It's kind of a pain. So you hear that's the bottom head being really loose. So we'll bring that up. You can see that. It's very thin. And normally I will not put calf heads on the bottom. I only have 2 drums that I do that with. I just wanted to try this one with it. All right. If I've put that video up already, you've already heard this drum. And this bottom head affects the snares. So. And we'll try it with some brushes. So this drum has a real snarey response, very wet. It sounds really good for some older kinds of jazz. I have one more drum, the Slingerland Gene Krupa drum, that sounds great for that too. So you'll hear that in a little while. So we'll put this one down. Now let's continue with the wood drums, and we'll grab this Sonar. This is a very heavy drum. Okay, this is a Sonar Phonic Rosewood from the late 1970s, or maybe early 70s. We're going to have to lower this stand here. It's a big one. It's 6.5 or 7. And this is a really wonderful snare drum. Of course, it tunes with a different key, so we're not going to do any tuning on it now because I left the key up in the mountains. But it normally sounds pretty good, as it does now. So this is a real snappy snare drum. Very dry sounding. It's got a very thick shell. These shells are literally 5/8 thick. And it's rosewood in and out, the ply. And I believe it's beechwood in between that, although I'm not positive. All these Sonar drums back in those days were built like tanks. I got a whole kit of these. If you watch my jazz drum kit video, I have a whole set of these. I did not have this snare drum at the time with me. I couldn't find it, and I finally found it. It was in a closet somewhere. So I took it back out, so this is probably the first time you're seeing it. It's really just a great drum. So this drum's tuned kind of tight right now. Normally I don't have it tuned this tight. It also sounds great low. Actually, we'll play it with the snares off. Very snappy, and brushes. Now I have a Remo Ambassador. It's a little bit worn out on this. I need to change it. This drum sounds amazing with calf heads. Maybe sometime I'll put it up there, put them on there for you. It does have an internal muffler, and all the parts here are original. The bottom, the snare head, is a Diplomat, very, very thin. So that's the Sonar Rosewood Phonic. Okay. That's safe, I think. Okay, we're going to have to go over here. All right, next we have this Slingerland. I believe this is a Spitfire. It's got the TDR strainer. I showed you this drum when I did my snare drum video, when I did like 30-something snare drums. I love this drum. This drum was stolen from me, and then one of my students actually found it in a pawn shop and returned it. It definitely needs a new head, but it sounds good, so I'm just going to leave that head on there. This drum and that Gene Krupa drum that you saw in one of my videos, which I'll show you in a minute, are similar, but this drum is a little bit brighter. Definitely needs a new head, not so good with brushes. So this is a Slingerland Spitfire, like I said, all original parts. And it's in really good shape. White marine pearl. And I would think this drum was probably from maybe the 70s, I'm pretty sure, or could be the early 80s. Great drum, though. Great jazz drum, if you find one. Very snappy sounding. All right. Finally, in the wood drum world, we have this Gene Krupa snare drum, Slingerland. And this is a great drum. I did a whole video on this where I was fixing the clamshell strainer. This is a Radio King. There's really nothing I have that sounds like this. It's so dry. sounding. So it's really good for certain kinds of things. I'm going to loosen up the strainer a little and play. Looks like I loosened it a little too much. Here we go. Now this was that drum I spoke about where it's really fussy getting the snares off. Sometimes you have to actually turn this other knob to get them to go off. That's the problem with those clamshell strainers. So that's one thing I do not like about these old Radio Kings with that strainer. It's all right. And with brushes, it sounds actually really good. We'll bring it back up here. Really nice and very unique. So these are worth owning because they sound so different. All right, so that's it for the wood drums. We'll take a little break and we'll be back with the metal drums. All right, we're back with the metal drums. So I have 5 of these to show you as well, but I have 2 of the same drum, which is that Smitty Smith drum, and we'll get to that after this. This is a Leedy. It's a reissue. It's probably about maybe 15 years old. This is one of my favorite snare drums overall. It's very heavy, die-cast rims. It's just a beautiful drum. And if I want that kind of Roy Haynes, real crisp snare sound, I reach for this. So that was my fault. I didn't have it seated all the way on the basket. That's why it didn't go all the way off. It's just a great drum. One of my favorites. I'll show you the snares. So these are pure cushion, the gold ones. And it's very heavy. It's probably about maybe, I don't know, 10, 11 pounds. Okay, in die-cast tubes. So that's a leady, a modern leady. Oops. All right, now we get to these Marvin Smitty Smith drums. And I believe I've used these before in several videos. This is a great snare drum. It's a 4.5, I think, by 14. And it's a great all-round drum, and they're not expensive. They don't make them anymore, but you could find them used. Like I said, I have 2 of them. I use them a lot. On this one, I have a Diplomat head, which is a thin head. On the bottom, I have a Diplomat as well. And I tune them, you know, I got them tuned pretty much the same, the calf and this one. If you tune it to an A, that's a good tuning for this drum. So. Real good all-around drum. Now let me show you when I tune it down what it sounds like. Because you can tune this drum all the way down and it still sounds good, even though it's a thin shell and only 4.5 deep. Now I'll show you the same drum with a calf head on it so you can compare it. All right. This calf head, I didn't spill coffee on it. That's the way some of them look. I guess because of the cow. All right. Let's make sure this stays on here. One thing about calf heads is when you put them on, the rim gets a little higher because of the way the heads sit. They're lower. So that's one thing you got to adjust to. You see the difference right away, though, how dark and warm it is. And with the snares off. It's like a completely different drum with these calf heads on here. Of course, nothing beats a calf head for brushes. So to me, this Marvin Smith drum with a calf head is one of the best, cheapest options for a jazz snare drum you can get. I got both of these drums for around a couple $100. I think now they go for probably $300 around there. They're pretty tough. They do tarnish a little bit, but you know, if you're not picky about the way it looks, I have one in perfect condition. The other one is a little bit tarnished. They sound great, though. Okay. So, this next drum is very similar in a lot of ways. This is a 1920s Ludwig, and it's got the Pioneer strainer. It's brass. Some of these drums were engraved. It's not a Black Beauty, but it sounds like it. It's got that warm, dark brass sound. It's beautiful, especially for kind of, you know, ECM kind of stuff. snares off. The snares do go off usually. Just a fantastic drum. It will cost you though. These things are very, very pricey. But they are brass, and originally it was black nickel. And like I said, some were engraved like the Black Beauty. I just had all that stripped off though. And this is what you get. Okay, so next we have a classic. This is a Gretsch. Let me make sure I picked up the right one. Yeah, this is a 4160 from the 1960s. It's a round badge, maybe the 1950s. I'll check. I have a few of these things, actually 4 of them. I have a couple stop sign badge ones, and I have this one. Now, this is the one I keep calf heads on. This is, I think, the best snare drum, the metal snare drum that Gretsch ever made. I know they're reissuing them. I have not checked those out. They probably sound the same. It's a very heavy drum. It's about 10 pounds, die-cast tubes. If you want it to open up a little, you can take off the die-cast tubes. I don't. I like them. I like the sound of the drum. So let's see what kind of tune this is in. See how low it is? Because it's humid here. So we'll bring it up. And this is just a great jazz drum. A lot of the old Blue Note recordings, you'd hear these on there. Just hear Philly Joe right now playing on one of these, okay? That's the sound. This calf head has a few rough spots. Sometimes you can sand them down. I'll do this with 400 grit sandpaper. I just put this calf head on here. It's actually a new one. So I love this drum. Doesn't necessarily work well with a flat ride, but with the old Ks, it's just got a beautiful sound. And again, you can find these used in the $300–400 range. It's a fantastic jazz drum. So that's the Gretsch 4160 chrome over brass. All right, finally we have one of my favorite jazz drums of all time. This is a Ludwig Black Beauty. Very similar to that old Ludwig in sound. It just looks better. Let's check the head. Woo, that went down. We'll bring it up a little. And this is a great 10-lug drum. It's got a thick calf head on the top and a very, very thin one on the bottom. And these are Lafima heads made in Europe. I really like these heads. So this drum is tuned very, very low right now. Part of the issue is the bottom head with these calf heads. This is, like I said, one of the two drums that I use that I put calf on top and bottom. That will definitely go on you because it's so thin. So the slightest weather change affects it in a major way. So I would definitely suggest if you do the bottom head, first off, if you're doing a lot of recording with it, change the bottom head to a plastic head. But I just like playing with this drum because it feels great. Let's see if that helped. There we go. One of these snare drums is still on. There it is. Yeah, it's got a lot of character, very, very dark. So if you're looking for a dark snare drum, one of these old Ludwigs with the thinner brass shells, the chrome over brass Gretsch is much, much thicker. So you're not going to get that kind of really low sound. Very unobtrusive. Some of my students who are loud snare players, in other words, they do this. I recommend they get one of these drums because it's never overbearing. If you play that loud with your left hand with one of these other drums, it's just going to ruin everything. So you can play louder with this snare, and it does really blend well with all kinds of cymbals. So that's a Ludwig Black Beauty. This is a reissue. It was an anniversary. I think the 90th anniversary this was. So that does it. I hope the camera didn't stop. We'll see. And I really enjoy doing this kind of thing. For me, I get to listen back and see what the different snares sound like. It's always surprising. So we'll see you next time.